I want to use some words to talk about words. I want to talk about the power of writing, the influence of words in public speaking. And to get us started on this little journey, I want to show you a clip from my favorite TV show of all time. It's called The West Wing. It was started by Aaron Sorkin, guy who wrote A Few Good Men, You Can't Handle the Truth. And this particular clip comes from the second season, and it's an episode called Galileo. And so to get us thinking about words, let's watch this.
Galileo 5.
Yes, sir.
Just the name.
Galileo 5.
You can feel the adventure.
Yes, indeed.
NASA's great at naming things.
They are.
Mercury, Apollo, Atlantis, the Sea of Tranquility, the Ocean of Storms.
Good names.
First time I heard Galileo 5, the way the imagination immediately, it reminded me of the way folks in my generation felt when we heard Yellow Submarine.
Okay.
We really did all want to live in a yellow
I
submarine.
can't believe they gave you people driver's licenses.
Tell me where we're going again.
Mars briefing rehearsal.
Why?
To rehearse.
Say the name.
I said the name.
Say it again. Your imagination, like a child, will explode with unrestrained possibilities for adventure.
Galileo 5.
You didn't say it right.
I said it fine.
Say it again.
Who wrote this intro? I did. You're from NASA Public Affairs? Yeah. You mind if I give it a polish? Is there a problem? No, it's great. You mind if I change it? I'd prefer if you didn't. Just the same. Public Affairs has cleared the text. If it's going to be changed, I'd prefer if the president changed it. See, that's kind of what he pays me to do, so... Look, I don't want to step on your toes. You don't want to step on mine. We're both writers. Yes, I suppose, if we broaden the definition to those who can spell. Excuse me?
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. President.
Sir, this is the crew from NASA Public Affairs.
How you doing?
Sir, we're going to run you through the drill for tomorrow morning. First of all, you'll be flanked on either side by the Flight Operations Manager, David Narakawa, and NASA Chief Administrator, Dr. Peter Jobson. On either side of them will be Dr. Samuel Thurman of the Meteorite Analysis Team from the Johnson Space Center and Dr. Joyce Gray Sutton, Planetary Geologist from Cal State Northridge. On these monitors, you'll be seeing the images beamed back from the surface, and on this computer screen, you'll be able to read the questions being sent in by the kids. I strongly urge you,
Yes.
I strongly urge you,
I know.
I strongly urge you, Mr. President, to act as moderator and pass the questions off to one of the experts on the panel rather than answer it yourself.
Yes.
Would you like to see some of the questions?
We have questions in advance?
Some of them, would you put them up?
Sure. Katie, 6th grader, Green Oaks, Junior High School, Austin, Texas, asked, how old is the planet Mars? That's a great question, Katie. The planet Mars is 4.6 billion years old.
What did I just say?
I knew that one.
Nobody likes a know-it-all.
Yes, God forbid that while talking to 60,000 public school students, the president should appear smart.
That's fine, just don't show off.
I don't show off. Stevie, 4th grader, PS 31, Manhattan, asked, what is the temperature on Mars? Well, Stevie, if one of our expert panelists were here, they would tell you the average temperature ranges from 15 degrees to minus 140.
That happens to be wrong. It ranges from 60 to minus 225.
I converted it to Celsius in my head.
Thank you.
Can I see the intro?
It's up on the prompter.
Ah, good morning. I'm speaking to you live from the West Wing of the White House. Today, we have a very unique opportunity to take part live in an extremely historic event which, whoa, boy.
How you doing, Mr. President?
Who wrote this intro?
I did, sir. I'm Scott Tate from NASA Public Affairs.
Scott, unique means one of a kind. Something can't be very unique, nor can it be extremely historic.
While we're at it, do we have to use the word live twice in the first two sentences like we just cracked the technology?
Look,
we're also broadcasting in living color, right?
Sam,
Yeah.
he's going to make some changes.
You can clear him with me?
I doubt it.
Write this. Good morning. 11 months ago, a 1,200-pound spacecraft blasted off from Cape Canaveral, Florida. 18 hours ago, is it 18 hours ago? We're on the air at noon Eastern.
Yeah.
18 hours ago, it landed on the planet Mars. You, me, and 60,000 of your fellow students across the country, along with astroscientists and engineers from the Jet Propulsion Lab in Southern California, NASA Houston, and right here at the White House, we're going to be the first to see what it sees, and to chronicle the extraordinary voyage of an unmanned ship called Galileo 5.
He said it right.
So let's talk about words. Let's talk about saying it right. And there you see, just in primetime TV from a few years ago, the power of just crafting a message using the correct words. And when we think about words, when we think about writing, when we think about speaking, we need to understand that there's great power in words. In fact, I would argue that nothing changes without somebody saying some words. When you look back through some of the great moments in history, many of them were started because somebody a man, a woman, a young person even stood up on a stage behind a podium in front of a TV, addressed an audience, and used some words to communicate a message. And we change things in the world by convincing people, by using words. But not only is there great power in words, for those of us who are in business, there is great profit in words. And there, some of the work that we do is simply putting together letters and words in ways that haven't been done before and selling them. And so whether we're writing an ebook or creating a video or preaching a sermon or writing a speech or creating a training manual or writing a novel, we put words together and other people want them. And so there's an opportunity to create profit from words. But also when you think about it, there's good company in words. So it's not just change, it's not just making money, but we're in good company. For those of you who are people of faith, people who might be a Christian like myself, you might look back to Jesus. And when Jesus was here, he chose to use words to communicate his message. He could have been a painter, he could have been a sculptor, but when he began his kind of public deal at the age of 30, he chose to preach and teach a message. And he used words to usher in the kingdom of God. And that is great, great company. And so here's the bottom line. If I had to boil down this little short training into one thing, it would be this. If you're going to say it, then say it right. If you're going to say it, then say it right. We all come to points in our lives where we have to say something. We have to send somebody an email. We have to stand up and make a few remarks. We have to write something down on a sheet of paper. If you're going to say it, you might as well say it right. Now, sometimes saying it right comes naturally. Sometimes you know just the right word at just the right time. But for the rest of us, it's hard work. William Zinsser, who I'm going to quote several times throughout this, he wrote a fantastic book called On Writing Well. He said, writing is hard work. A clear sentence is no accident. And I can relate to that because so many times my first response is not a clear sentence. It's a bunch of words that are thrown together quickly, kind of like that introduction that the president did in that video clip we showed. But in order to get down to a clear sentence, it's going to require intentionality and it's going to require hard work. So I want to give you 4 keys to saying it right. If you're going to say it right. And key number 1 is to have a point. So if you're going to say it right. Well, what's the it? What is the it in that sentence? What is the point that you're trying to say? See, too many times we write before we're ready. We sit down and we have to write a message, we have to craft an email, and instead of pausing to think, what do I want to say, we start working. And so we don't communicate what we really intend to communicate because we haven't really taken the time to think about what we want to say. Albert Einstein said this, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And so I'd argue that we need to just encapsulate our simple point before we begin to try to explain it, that we've got to explain it simply to ourselves. And so when you're crafting any message, here are 3 questions that you can ask. Whether this is an email, whether this is a blog post, whether this is a sermon, whether this is a manual, anything that you're going to write, what if you ask yourself these 3 questions? Number 1, what do you want people to know? I mean, what do you want people to know? Number 2, what do you want people to do? As they listen or read, what is it that exactly that you want them to do? And then number 3, this is so important, how do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel convicted? Do you want them to feel encouraged? Do you want them to feel inspired? Do you want them to feel guilty? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to feel? And if you can grasp those things just momentarily, even in your head, before you begin to write something, then you'll have a point. And when you begin to say it well, you'll know what the it is, so you can say it well. So let's keep going. To get us to point number 2 and how to say it right, let me give you another quote from our friend William Zinsser. Here's what he said. The secret to good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. So the secret, the key to good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. And so principle number 2 is to think like a stripper. Now I was going to put a graphic in here, maybe of a pole or something like that, but then I realized it would probably not be a good idea to go on the internet and search for such a graphic. And so I'll leave it to you to think like a stripper. And here's what I mean. Obviously I don't mean a stripper. I mean somebody who would take things away. I mean people that would take things away. And so we write a sentence, the very next thing we have to do is take words away from it. So here's another quote. He says, writing improves in direct ratio to the numbers of things we can keep out of it that shouldn't be there. In other words, we've got to go through and we've got to remove all unnecessary words from what we wrote. Now, When I first began to do this, it was difficult, but now that I've done it for a little while, it's become easier. And so I thought the best way to do this would just be to give you a list. So here's some examples of things that we can remove from our writing. A couple of them you heard in the video. First of all, you can remove adjectives like very unique. And you heard Jed Bartlett, the fictitious president, say something can't be very unique because unique means one of a kind. I can't tell you how many times I've read the phrase very unique, and every time I read it, I think the word very is unnecessary. It's just a writer trying to make it seem more dramatic, but it's not necessary. We can simply say it's unique. He said something can't be extremely historic. It's either historic or it's not. It can't be extremely historic. And so if you write a sentence using the word extremely historic, you should go and strip out the word extremely because it's not there. Again, adjectives are just words that describe nouns, but many of them are not necessary. A tall skyscraper. He climbed up the tall skyscraper. Look at that tall skyscraper. As if there are short skyscrapers. The word tall is unnecessary. It needs to be removed. You also can't quickly hurry somewhere. You can either hurry somewhere or you don't hurry somewhere. You take your time. But you cannot quickly hurry somewhere. So the word quickly in this sentence is unnecessary. Here's one that used to pain me. I used to do this all the time. The word that, when you write the word that in a sentence, it's rarely needed. Almost every time you use the word that, you can take it out and it makes sense. It makes the sentence cleaner. You strip that word out, it's not necessary. How about exclamation points? There are better ways to communicate excitement, and most of the time, they're just not needed. And so what we can do is when we write a sentence, we can just simply go back through it, think like a stripper, and remove unnecessary words. And so let me give you an example. This sentence is from an ebook that we produced at the Rocket Company, and this particular ebook was on digital giving. We're trying to convince people to encourage people to give on their website, maybe to use a giving kiosk, and we were trying to explain that people just didn't have cash. And so this was the actual sentence, and here's what it said. It said, this means that people who attend our weekend services will not be carrying a bunch of cash or checks with them. Now, that's fine. It's adequate. It's written pretty quickly. This means that people who attend our weekend services will not be carrying a bunch of cash or checks with them, so you need to have these other options. But in just about 30 seconds, you can go back through and say there are a lot of words that are not necessary in this sentence. And so let's edit it. Let's just think like a stripper and just go through this and just edit it. And what if we said it like this? People who attend weekend services do not carry cash or checks. So this means that is not necessary. There's the word that. So we just get rid of that whole first part. Instead of saying they will not be carrying, we just say do not carry. It's less words. A bunch of cash or checks with them, we just say cash or checks. And then with them is superfluous. We know that the people are carrying, we're talking about the people and what they have in their pockets, so we don't need to say with them. And so we can think like a stripper and shorten this sentence down and use less words, but it becomes a more powerful statement of fact. And that's why William Zinsser says that rewriting is the essence of writing well. Now, I'm not talking about proofreading or checking for spelling errors. I'm talking about reading what you've written to make sure that you're saying it right. I'm not talking about having somebody look at it for spelling and punctuation. That's important, but that may be another step. I'm talking about you are the only one that knows in your mind what the it is that you're trying to say. No one else can do that for you. I'm talking about taking a few seconds and going back through and saying, did this sentence, this paragraph, this speech, this message, this script, did I say what I want to say? Am I saying it right? That's why I say that we should write with a pen but edit with an axe. And this is painful sometimes because we get attached to what we wrote. It's pretty tough to go through your own work and take stuff out of it because you worked to put it there. But if we'll write with a pen and edit with an axe, we're going to come up with a cleaner point, and we will not just say it, but we will say it right. We've got to make sure our message is right before you make sure you're saying it right. And so as we look at sentence and strip out words, what we're looking for is we're looking to say, am I communicating what I really want to communicate? So let's keep going. We've said we need to have a point. We said we need to think like a stripper. Number 3, you got to watch your mouth. You got to watch your mouth. I mean, this is what Mama told us. We've got to watch our mouth. Now, I went to college at Florida State University, and I was an English major. And so I had a lot of English classes, a lot of English, American literature, British literature, a lot of literature, a lot of writing, creative writing, journalism kind of classes. And during that time, I really developed a respect for the English language. And sometimes when I sit down at a computer and I sit down to write, and it may just be an email or it may be something, it helps me to think that I'm writing in the same language of Shakespeare. It helps me to think that I'm using the same words that Thomas Jefferson used to pen the Declaration of Independence. And I don't always succeed, but I try to have a respect for the words that I'm using because I have a great respect for the English language. It's kind of beat into me by my professors at Florida State. But I don't think it's just our words that we should have respect for. I think it's our work. I think we should have respect not just for the words that we use, but for the work that we do. And for those of us who have to sit down and write something, whether it's an email to a client or a customer, or whether it's a message that we'll be delivering in public, I think we owe it to our work to say it right. And again, if you're a person of faith, you'd be familiar with a person named the Apostle Paul. He used to be named Saul. He met Jesus, had this conversion experience, became Paul, and he ended up writing about 2/3 of the New Testament. And he wrote to a group of Christians in an ancient town of Colossae one time, and he said this to them. He said, "Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord, not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive an inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ." And so the Apostle Paul says, hey, whatever you do, you've got to do it with all your heart. You've got to work heartily. That's what that means. It's do it wholeheartedly with all your heart. Do your best. And so I would say not only just whatever we do, but whatever we write. Are we doing our best? So as I begin to think through this and think through how I work, and am I doing my best? Am I bringing my A game? Am I bringing my best to this? I had to challenge myself to not let my unique personality become an excuse for doing a bad job. And I'll give you an example. I'm not a very precise person. That's why I don't do well with things like woodworking or building things, because you have to measure precisely or things will be off. And so a lot of times I'll measure something, and I'll get out the skill saw to cut something, and I'll be pretty much right. But if you're building something and trying to do your best there, pretty much right is not right. Pretty exact is not exact. So you need to be exact. Now my wife is precise. She measures twice, the whole deal. She's precise. I'm not. So if I'm not careful, I'll just do a shoddy job, not take time, not measure correctly, not do it right, and then just say, well, I'm just not wired that way. I'm just not a precise person. Well, the fact that I'm just not wired that way is not an excuse to do a bad job. That's taking the easy way out. And so when you're writing, I want to encourage you not to take the cheap way out. Not to take the cheap way out. There are cheap things that we can do. If you're a comedian, you can get a cheap laugh just by throwing in some unnecessary cuss words sometimes. I don't know why it is that people think it's funny if comedians just drop the F-bomb in the strangest place and people will laugh. That's a cheap laugh. And I heard Jerry Seinfeld say one of the times he doesn't fill his shows with so much profanity is because it's cheap laugh, and he's better than that, and his audience is better than that. Public speakers do it too. Public speakers know that there's certain kind of jokes that you can always do if things aren't going so well in order to kind of get cheap engagement, to kind of perk people up. And a lot of times it's hey, look to your neighbor and say this, look to your neighbor and say that. That there's these kind of cheap ways that you can get involvement or get interest. But in writing, I want to encourage you not to take the cheap way out. So things like grammar, punctuation, and spelling, they all matter. I'm a terrible speller. But we have spell check. I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful that when I write, half the words are underlined red, and I can go back and fix them. When I was thinking about this, taking the cheap way out and about just having respect for words, I remembered a blog post from my friend Ben Arment. He wrote a blog post, and he wrote a blog post called Slinging Around First Draft Emails. And it's just a paragraph long. Here's what he said. He said, I think a lot of us are slinging around first draft emails. They're thoughtless, cold, and personal. We've turned email into a task list. And never mind who's on the receiving end of our productivity. Call me crazy, but I think we need to go for second draft email. This is where you take a second stab at the note before hitting send. You add the person's name. You respect them by capitalizing the first letter in their name. You add a note of kindness, and if you're really crazy, maybe even an encouraging sign-off. Put a nice second coat on that message to make it pop. And here's what he says. Win some friends and influence some people. And so what Ben's saying is, look, the point of doing this, the point of adding the name, the point of looking at it, the point of reading it over, it's not even just to be smarter. It's not even just to be better. It's that if you do that, you may actually win some friends and influence some people. And that's what we're trying to do. And if we're going to write the email, don't we want it to communicate the message that we want to send? And so if we're going to say it, shouldn't we say it right? So let's keep going. I'll give you number 4, and finally this. Know your audience. See, most writing is me-centric. In other words, it's about me. It's about my thoughts, my preferences, my ideas. But you is one of the most powerful words in the English language. Most of the time when we write, we say me, I. But if we can switch that to talk about the people who are actually receiving this message, it's going to be received in a whole lot more successful manner. Let me give you, again, an example. Here's the beginning of a blog post. Just a blog post on a blog. In this post, I'm going to show you 2 of the most powerful lessons I learned about writing. Learning these lessons have helped me become a better blogger. Now, if I were writing a blog post on 3 things I've learned about blogging, that might be how I would just start the blog post. Let me tell you things I've learned. They're very powerful. I've learned them. And they've helped me. Again, that's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not particularly great. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just off the top of my head. But let's put this through the filter and say, you know what? That's about me. I'm going to show you. I learned these lessons. These lessons have helped me. What if we said it like this? By the end of this post, you will be a more effective blogger. All because you learned 2 very important words and the specific reasons why those words are so crucial. That's from a website called Copyblogger. And you see how Copyblogger did that, how Brian Clark did that? He said he just started off the post and it was about the audience. By reading this, you will be more effective. And I read that and go, yeah, I want to read a blog post about how I can be more effective. I don't particularly care how you became more effective. And so what we've got to do when we write is we've got to get into the mind of our audience. We've got to ask ourselves, what are their hopes? What are their fears? What are their interests? What are their beliefs? We have the opportunity to coach a lot of preachers through Preaching Rocket, preachingrocket.com. And one of the things that we teach preachers who are sitting down to work on sermons and messages, and again, if you don't even go to church, I think you would believe, yes, that's an important thing that happens in churches. I mean, you may not even be a church person, but you know of church that there's a message, and that message probably kind of important. Whether you believe it or not, it's an important part to the flow. One of the things we teach preachers to be more effective is we tell them that while their message preparation should start with the Bible, because we should start there. That's where we should start, with the Bible. That's what God said. But our sermon itself should start with the audience. So by all means, we should look at the Bible and begin our message prep there. But when we get up to speak, we don't just get up and say, blah, 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 blah. We get up and we say, connect with them. We start with where they are. What do they think? And so we want to start with our audience. So let's review. Number 1, gotta have a point. Gotta have a point. Just take a few minutes to say, what do we want them to know? What do we want to do? What do we want them to feel? Have a point. What is it? If you're going to say it right, what is the it? Number 2, think like a stripper. Remove all the unnecessary words, phrases, adjectives, adverbs. Number 3, watch your mouth. Have some respect for the English language. Don't let our personality become an excuse for doing a bad job. And number 4, know your audience. Get inside their head. Write for them. Write for what they need to know. If you do all those things, I believe you will not only have said it, but you will have said it right.